You never needed to chase him, but you did. With your energy, your silence, your longing. And he felt it, even if he never said a word. But now, something has shifted. You're not reaching, you're not waiting. You've stopped feeding the invisible cord. And that silence, the one he used to run from, is now the loudest sound in his soul. He doesn't know why he's restless, why your name won't leave his dreams, why certain songs bring him to the edge of emotion, why he suddenly feels you pulling away for good. And that's when the reversal begins. Because the moment the divine feminine reclaims her timeline, the masculine feels the weight of what he's about to lose. Not a fantasy, not a dream, but the one woman who saw him before he saw himself. This is why he becomes the chaser, not because you forced it, but because you finally didn't. And now, his soul is running after a version of you he never thought he'd have to catch. Why the masculine is becoming the chaser now. You didn't threaten to leave. You didn't demand anything. You simply stopped waiting. And in that moment, without words, without explanation, the energy shifted. The divine masculine, who once moved slowly, passively, or even ran from the intensity, suddenly felt something missing. Not just your presence, but his anchor. Because he was never afraid of you. He was afraid of what you represented. A love that saw through him. A mirror that revealed his truth. A soul that knew his before he even knew his own. And for a long time, that truth was too big, too confronting, too destabilizing for a version of him still clinging to control, logic, and safety. So he avoided. He distracted. He silenced what he didn't yet have the courage to face. But you didn't chase, not this time. And that broke the pattern. The masculine begins chasing when the feminine no longer feeds the cord. When she stops sending energetic offerings through her worry, her hope, her rituals, her checking. When she pulls her light back into her own temple. That shift in frequency hits him like a wave. It's not loud in the physical. It's not obvious on the outside, but internally, it shakes his field. He doesn't know why he suddenly misses you so fiercely. Why your voice echoes through his dreams. Why he finds himself looking for you in the face of strangers, in songs, in old photos. Why certain moments of silence now feel like unbearable distance. The kind he created, but no longer wants. Have you felt the difference when you stopped explaining yourself to the universe? When you stopped asking, when will he wake up? And started asking, how do I return to myself? That's the moment the energetic baton passed. He begins to feel the weight of absence, not because you left, but because you returned home to your own essence. This isn't punishment. This isn't manipulation. This is spiritual recalibration. The masculine runs when there's something inside him he doesn't want to face. But the moment he feels your energy no longer holding space for his avoidance, he feels the void. And the void isn't empty. It's sacred pressure. It's the pull to grow. It's the ache to rise. He may not know why he feels like calling you again. He may not understand why certain memories flood back in waves. But his soul does. Because your surrender isn't silence. It's a frequency shift. And when the frequency changes, the roles shift. You're not the same woman he walked away from. You're not orbiting him anymore. You're in your own center. And from that center, you've become magnetic. Can you feel him now? Noticing what he didn't before? Have you caught glimpses in dreams where he chases, speaks, reaches? Have you seen his energy circling, testing the water, searching for the current that used to come freely? He is becoming the chaser because he has no choice. Not if he wants to reconnect, not if he wants to find you again, not the old version of you, but the woman you've become through the fire. You are not bait. You are not a lesson. You are the mirror of what he could become if he's willing to rise. And that mirror is now moving forward. So he runs, not from you, but toward what he finally realizes he doesn't want to lose. This is the sacred reversal, and it always begins when you no longer wait for it. What your detachment triggers in his awakening. He thought you'd always be there, energetically holding space, spiritually waiting, silently hoping. Even if you weren't calling, texting, or reaching out, your presence was still wrapped around him like a spiritual thread, always pulling, always comforting, always reminding him that love was still on the other side of his fear. But then you stopped, not in anger, not in resentment, but in stillness, a kind of quiet surrender that doesn't scream, "I'm done," because it doesn't have to. It simply stops offering its energy to the altar of delay. And that's when something inside him begins to unravel, because your detachment didn't feel like punishment. It felt like absence, real absence. Not the kind he's used to creating, but the kind he never thought he'd feel coming from you. And suddenly his chest tightens without warning. The world feels a little colder. The days blend together, and nothing inspires him. And he doesn't understand why. Until the silence echoes so loudly that he finally realizes he can no longer feel you the way he used to. Have you noticed how your energy has shifted since you let go? How you sleep deeper? How you feel more rooted in your body? How your nervous system isn't waiting for a sign, a text, or a message? That's not just healing. That's frequency withdrawal. And he feels it. He may not understand why. He may not have the language for energetic attunement, but his soul does. And it's grieving the loss of something it thought would always be there. Because when the divine feminine detaches, she stops sending energy into an open loop. She reclaims it. And when that energy comes back to her, it stops holding him. And for the first time, he's alone in the space he thought was his escape. That detachment, it's not distance, it's sacred boundary. And for him, it becomes an initiation, one that whispers, "You can't come forward as half, not anymore." Can you remember the moment you finally said, "I can't keep doing this to myself"? The moment you looked at your own reflection and realized he's not the answer to your fullness? That choice, that powerful, painful choice, sent a shockwave through the connection. Because the bond doesn't break when the feminine detaches. It realigns. It forces truth to rise. And the masculine feels that pressure. He may react with confusion, with anger, with silence. But underneath it all, he's awakening. Not because you told him to, not because you convinced him, but because your withdrawal created space for his own voice to emerge. And what does he hear in that space? The echoes of your love. The prayers you once whispered for his healing. The memories that no longer arrive with sweetness, but with urgency. This is where his soul begins to confront itself, where the avoidance no longer works, where the silence turns into restlessness, and where the longing finally becomes unbearable. He starts to see what he never saw clearly before, that the version of you who once waited is gone, and the version of you who now walks forward is the one he actually wants, but isn't sure he can reach. What if your detachment wasn't abandonment, but permission? Permission for him to step into the fire of his own becoming. Permission for him to feel your absence not as rejection, but as invitation. Invitation to rise, to feel, to choose. And now, the question is no longer, will you wait? It's, will he follow? Can you trust that letting go didn't end the story, but unlocked the part where he has to decide if he's ready to carry it? Your detachment is not cruelty. It's clarity. It's the soft power of a woman who no longer gives her light to a version of love that demands her to be empty. He feels it in his bones, in his breath, in the way your energy no longer surrounds him, and it haunts him more than he ever expected. Because now, if he wants to find you again, he has to walk through the part of himself he was never willing to face. And that, dear soul, is exactly what your detachment was meant to trigger all along. He didn't notice it at first. The energy shift was subtle. Your silence didn't come with a scream or a storm. There was no final message, no grand exit, no closure. Just a softness that vanished. A quiet absence where once there was presence. But now, days, weeks, maybe even months later, he feels it. Not just mentally, in his body, in the weight in his chest that wasn't there before, in the way his mornings feel gray and empty, in the flicker of thought that whispers, she's really gone this time. This is the moment his soul starts catching up to what your spirit already knew. Because something shifted in the field, something broke open the moment you stopped waiting. And now, in the silence he once thought he needed, he hears the echo of everything he tried to avoid. He never believed he would lose your energy. You were always there somehow. Not physically maybe, but spiritually. He could feel you, holding space, praying, loving him from a distance. But now, he reaches for that invisible thread, and it's not there, and that's when the panic begins. Have you ever felt like you disappeared inside yourself? Not out of fear, but out of exhaustion? Have you ever surrendered, not because you stopped loving, but because loving him in that way was hurting more than healing? That surrender is the gateway, and on the other side of it, something inside him awakens. It's not romantic at first. It's not, I miss her. It's confusion, emptiness, a feeling that something vital has left his orbit, and he doesn't understand why everything suddenly feels off. The masculine isn't used to naming emotions. He's been trained to suppress, to perform, to stay in control. So when the field changes, when your energy no longer supports his avoidance, he doesn't immediately say, she let go. He says, I can't focus. I feel weird. Nothing feels right. But slowly, as the days stretch, the realization begins to crystallize. It wasn't the world that changed. It was you. You are no longer available in the way you once were. No longer holding space for the version of him that couldn't choose. No longer sacrificing your energy on the altar of potential. And as that recognition sets in, so does the grief. not just of losing you, but of never fully showing up when you were still offering everything. This is when his soul starts to feel the weight of what you carried, the depth of what you gave, the purity of what you offered, even when it was met with silence. And now, the silence is his. Can you feel it? The turning point where he finally begins to feel what you felt all along. The ache, the longing, the unspoken what if. But this is not about punishment. It's about reflection. His soul is not being punished. It's being shown. Shown the consequences of spiritual hesitation. Shown the cost of delay. Shown what it really means to be met with the mirror of love and not choose to stand in it. And as this wave of realization deepens, he doesn't run. He remembers. He remembers the look in your eyes when you saw him fully. He remembers your softness, your fire, your light. He remembers the way you made him feel like he had time, infinite time. And now, that illusion is crumbling because he can feel it in his bones. You're no longer standing where he left you. You're moving, not in anger, but in truth, in power, in purpose. And for the first time, he understands what the soul feels when it wakes up too late. Do you still dream of him, even though you've let go? Do you feel his pull in strange moments, not with hope, but with clarity? That's his soul remembering. That's the bond reaching. That's the masculine facing the void you left behind and realizing it wasn't just silence. It was freedom. And now the question is no longer, does he love me? It's, is he willing to rise in time to meet the woman I've become? Because the soul knows, you are no longer the woman who begged for signs. You are the woman who became one, and he knows it too. In the quiet hours of the night, when the distractions fall away and the world no longer demands performance, he begins to feel it. A pulse, a memory, a presence that doesn't come from thought, but from soul. She's not messaging him. She's not watching his stories. She's not lighting candles for him anymore. And still, she's everywhere. That's when the signs begin. Not gentle at first, not this time. Because this isn't the universe trying to get his attention. It's his own soul breaking through. He dreams of her again. But it's different now. She's not reaching for him. She's walking away. Or worse, she's silent, peaceful, unreachable. And he wakes up with a tightness in his chest that doesn't leave for hours. He checks his phone, nothing. He scrolls through old pictures. He plays that one song, the one that always brought her energy close. But this time, it doesn't work. Because he doesn't want just the memory anymore. He wants the real her. Have you ever felt a strange surge of energy before sleep? A sense of being watched or held? Have you woken up from dreams where he was the one trying to speak, to explain, to follow? That's not coincidence. That's soul-level contact. That's him reaching. Because when the feminine truly detaches, the masculine begins to open, not just emotionally, but spiritually. And with that opening comes awareness. And with awareness comes the signs. Her name starts showing up. The same number appears again and again. A stranger says something she once said. He hears her voice in places that shouldn't echo her sound, and he's not imagining it. Because now, the silence has turned into space. And in that space, the echoes get louder. He thought he could handle the distance. He thought if she stopped chasing, he would feel free. But now, he realizes, it wasn't her that made him feel trapped. It was everything he never said. The signs are haunting because they aren't random. They are the soul's way of screaming what the ego ignored for too long. And it's not just signs, it's sensation. He feels heat in his chest at the thought of her, tingles down his spine at the memory of her hands. His breath catches when he sees someone who wears her perfume. And all of it, every strange flicker, every unexplained chill, brings him back to the truth. She was real, and now she's gone. Have you ever paused midday, feeling a sudden emotional wave with no cause? Have you whispered, "Is he thinking of me?" and felt the answer before the mind could even speak? That's the bond. And it doesn't die, it changes shape. It becomes a mirror. And now he's looking into it, maybe for the first time. The masculine doesn't usually understand signs the way the feminine does. He doesn't chase meaning in numbers or dream journals. But now, he's beginning to feel what he once ignored, and it terrifies him. Because for the first time, he sees what she saw all along. That this was never casual, never temporary, never just a phase. This was a contract, a cosmic assignment, a love that came here to break everything false inside them, so that what's real could rise. And now he's realizing she's rising, and he's still standing in place. So the signs get louder, the dreams get longer, the synchronicities close in like a rhythm, heartbeat after heartbeat, reminding him. She was the echo of his awakening. And now he must decide if he will rise to meet it. Do you feel him more when you're no longer trying to connect? Do you sense his energy, not because you're reaching, but because he is? That's the reversal. And it always begins when the feminine stops begging for alignment and becomes it. He is haunted now, not by her absence, but by what her presence used to awaken in him. And this time, there is no rescue, no energetic offering, no spiritual chase, only a path. And he has to walk it, or lose her to the woman she was always becoming. How the feminine holds her power in this phase. She thought power meant proving her worth by staying, proving her devotion by waiting, proving her love by forgiving. Again and again, the wounds he didn't know how to name. But not anymore, because now, in this phase of the journey, she understands something that changes everything. Her power was never in her endurance. It was always in her energy. She doesn't need to speak to be felt. She doesn't need to chase to be chosen. She doesn't need to suffer to prove she was real. Now, she sits in a different space, one the masculine never expected her to reach, not because she's stronger, but because she's finally whole. This is where her power blooms, in the quiet, in the stillness, in the fierce grace of someone who has seen her own reflection and refused to keep dimming it. She no longer gives her energy away in the name of patience. She no longer holds space where nothing is being built. She no longer keeps the fire burning for someone who fears the warmth. She honors the bond. Yes, but not by carrying it alone. Not by keeping the thread alive with her light while he stands in his shadows. Now, she becomes the mirror. Not to punish, not to withdraw love, but to return to herself. because that is the sacred design of this phase. The moment when she stops bending into the shape of his becoming and finally steps into her own. Have you felt that shift inside you? That moment where you're no longer asking, what does he feel? But instead, what do I feel? And what deserves my light now? That's not detachment. That's evolution. And with it comes a different kind of magnetism. She glows differently now. Not because she's trying to attract him, but because she's finally stopped shrinking. Her radiance is no longer about seduction. It's about sovereignty. And he feels it. He doesn't always understand it, but he feels the shift. The space where her energy once reached for him is now being used to build her next version. The same love that once poured outward is now pouring inward, and that current is strong. So strong, it creates pressure. Pressure on the field, pressure in his chest, pressure in the connection itself. Because when the feminine reclaims her energy, everything else has to reorganize around it. She no longer fills the gaps. She no longer initiates the healing. She no longer softens herself to be easier to love. She becomes the gate to reunion, the gate to truth, the gate to a timeline that only opens when both have chosen themselves fully. Have you been called to rest, to retreat, to stop explaining your path? That's the invitation of this phase. It asks you to hold your power without performance, to hold your love without leaking, to hold your knowing without begging it to be seen. Because your power isn't in what he chooses now. It's in what you refuse to abandon in yourself, regardless of what he does. This is the alchemy of the feminine. She grieves and grows at the same time. She loves and lets go simultaneously. She stands still and moves mountains without lifting a finger. And that's the medicine he never expected. Because while he runs in circles searching for the echo, you've become the source. You are no longer the version of you who kept the light on in case he came back. You are the fire itself, the breath, the awakening, and your power is no longer about whether he sees it. It's about whether you stay in it. So hold it, even when you ache, even when you miss him, even when you wonder if your silence will be misunderstood. Hold your truth. Because this isn't the part of the journey where you wait. This is where you become what you were always meant to be, unshakable, unchained, unapologetically divine. He thought she would always be there, not in the physical perhaps, but in the energy, in the background, in the silence, in the ache that softened whenever he missed her. He counted on that, the steady pulse of her love, the way it held him through his storms without asking for anything in return, the way her spirit stayed even when her heart was breaking. He assumed the thread between them was unbreakable, and in many ways it was. But what he didn't know is that she wasn't. She was breakable. She bled quietly. For years, she waited in sacred stillness, not out of weakness, but out of hope. She stretched her energy across timelines, across dimensions, across wounds that weren't hers to heal. Until one day, she didn't. He woke up, and her energy wasn't there anymore. She wasn't holding the space. She wasn't whispering to the sky. She wasn't anchoring his soul through hers. She had moved. And not out of bitterness, out of alignment. Because the version of herself that kept reaching for him could no longer exist in the woman she was becoming. And now he feels it. Not in logic, but in longing. Not in the mind, but in the marrow. He feels her detachment as a void inside him. Not a punishment, not a tactic, a truth. And that truth hurts more than any silence ever could, because it tells him something his ego never wanted to admit. She was the constant. She was the anchor. She was the reason he didn't feel completely lost. And now that she's no longer circling, he is. Do you remember when you begged the universe to make him feel you? To show him your depth, to awaken him to what he was running from? That moment is here, but it didn't come through force. It came through surrender. It came when you stopped trying to be unforgettable and became undeniable. He's chasing now, but he's not chasing the version of you that waited. He's chasing the version he never really knew, the one who rose while he slept, the one who stopped translating his silence into hope, the one who learned to speak love in her own language, not in the language of lack. He's not chasing memories, he's chasing momentum. And this time, it's not on your side, it's in you. He feels the new power in your field, the quiet confidence, the elegance in your boundaries, the way you don't need him to awaken for you to be alive. That is what terrifies him and draws him closer. Because for the first time, he's not just missing what you were. He's realizing what he could lose if he doesn't rise now. Have you felt it? The shift where your heart still loves him, but no longer needs to be chosen to feel full? That is your power. And that is the force that moves the masculine. Not your devotion, but your detachment from the timeline where you had to lose yourself just to love him. He's running now, not to reclaim what was, but to try, Ben, for the first time, to meet what is. You. The woman you've become, the version of you that stopped bending, the soul that remembered. She was never waiting for him. She was waiting for herself. And now that she's here, the whole field is shifting. Now he must decide if he will chase her shadow or become the kind of man who can stand beside her in the light. And if he doesn't, you will not collapse. You will not ache as before. You will not retreat into mourning. You will rise. Because once a woman meets herself at that depth, she never waits again. She walks, and if he wants to meet her now, he'll have to run after the woman she became.